The UK is planning to ban sex ed for children under 9. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Open Minds. I'm your host, Christopher Balkrin, and I'm exploring the world's biggest topics through genuine curiosity. So leave a like, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and hopefully use these videos as talking points in your own conversations. So the UK is planning to ban sex ed for children under 9. This comes from new government policy direction, which will ban teaching sex ed to children under 9 under new government guidance. One union has said the review is politically motivated, with the UK having a conservative government currently, and the government does believe that clearer guidance will provide support for teachers and reassurance for parents, and will set out which topics should be taught to pupils and at what age. So certainly I think many would agree that maybe it's not clear what actually is being taught to children under 9. And it very well may not be like explicit sex education at that point. In fact, I almost could guarantee it's not. But it does raise the age-old kind of conservative versus liberal view on sex ed, right? Conservatives are very much for traditional family values, letting parents make those decisions and have those tough conversations with their children and not the state. And liberals or progressives typically say, progressive liberals on this issue say, but if we expose kids early enough to sex ed, it'll lead to healthier sex choices later in life. So very interesting, the perspectives that are being taken here, because I think both are, I don't know, they have their limitations. And I don't necessarily believe either of them to be fully true. You know, on the one hand, I definitely could see the progressives arguing with conservatives to say, how many parents are actually having that conversation with their kids, right? A lot of parents probably aren't. And as a result of that absence of knowledge and conversation and questioning, maybe kids are making less informed choices as a result. On the other hand, I could totally see how parents will be very concerned about exposing young adults, young people in general, to sex ed at a young age when their minds aren't fully able to assess and analyze the consequences of these types of behaviors and what they mean. So it's very tricky. Both are they're very limiting in their approaches. And the reason they're limiting is because there's not enough research to show that sex ed leads to behavioral change. I think that's something that all sides probably agree on, that behavioral change may actually be something like the end goal that we want to get to. So a behavioral change could be less unwanted teenage pregnancies. That could be something both sides could agree on, to be like, you know what, that's actually something maybe we want to undertake, tackle, address in some meaningful way. But the research is so conflicting because you'd have to get people, young people in particular, to say, because of the sex ed curriculum, I made better choices with my sex life as a result, better, more informed choices. You got to remember, a lot of youth probably aren't going to fill out that survey, but also a lot of youth are probably not comfortable discussing this in a very open manner. So unwanted teenage pregnancies, again, that's a big issue. It brings a lot of shame and guilt, etc., to young females. But here in Canada, we know the majority of abortions happen between the ages of 13 to 17. That's not my opinion. That's just fact. And I'm certain that's probably the same in other G7 nations as well. Getting young people to talk about this in a very open way is not easy because there's a lot of shame, guilt, mental health, depression, anxiety, etc. So that just limits studies and their ability to measure that. But there was a comprehensive study done in the UK called the Ripple study, which compared, is a longitudinal study that looked at students who attended teacher-led sex ed and peer-led sex ed. And what they found was that there wasn't a change in behavior from both groups when it came to sex and sexual preferences and sexual behavior. So that at least tells us that even if you have sex ed led by a teacher or by a peer, it doesn't inform or change someone's sexual behaviors, which again is very interesting. So I think both the conservatives and the liberals on this topic believe that somehow schools or government policy or sex ed can change and address something like unwanted teenage pregnancies. The reality is there's not enough evidence to prove that comprehensively. To say that if only students attend sex ed, let's say at 9 or 10, and they consistently attend up until they're 18 or 19, they're going to make better choices throughout that time period. There's no evidence to suggest that that's the case. Even the research that progressives point to, and I have it right here. This is common research that's pointed. It's done. I think it's the Journal of Adolescent Health. That's right. It says 3 decades of research, the case for comprehensive sex education, and the conclusion says literature of the past 3 decades provides strong support for comprehensive sex ed across a wide range of topics and grade levels. Findings strengthen justification for the widespread adoption of the national health sex education standards. But when you actually go through the report in detail, they actually say that behavioral changes are inconclusive, that it's not really conclusive that sex ed changes attitudes, perceived norms, and knowledge when it comes to behavior. And that is actually quite interesting in and of itself. That even research that the liberals cite doesn't show changed behavior as a result. And so you might be asking, okay, so then what do? Do we just accept that there are unwanted teenage pregnancies, that there are going to be higher abortion rates for that age group, 13 to 17? If both sides agree this is something that should be addressed, I don't think we should just accept it, but perhaps we should instead accept the sexual behavior that teens are undergoing and are part of in a very open and liberal society when it comes to sex. You know, when we have very progressive views as a society around sex, perhaps there is a linkage between that and teenage sexual choices. And so we're kind of in this nebulous space where we have very liberal social policies, and certainly that's playing a factor in teenagers and their sex choices as well. So in many ways, we in the West have ourselves to blame for creating the environment for sexual liberalization to extend to teenagers. I mean, there's no, there's no driver's license you have to get to have sex. So in a way, we are our own enemy, quote unquote. We are our own fault for creating the environment for sex to be as widely adopted by all ages. And so a strategy we could probably do to address this is maybe taking a more broader approach. So accessing sexual health services perhaps is one way where we can talk about this. So if instead we say, listen, we're not here to judge. We're not here to say traditional family values, nor are we here to say, hey, by the way, like more sex ed equals better, healthier sex outcomes. We don't know that at all. But maybe the better way is to say there are sexual health services, if you'd like to access them, with professionals who can guide you through decision making. And you make that decision in alignment with your family, your culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because there's a lot of services out there that probably are underutilized in our countries when it comes to sex ed. So access to sexual health services might be a way to address that issue. Again, unwanted teenage pregnancy. I think the other piece to this is recognizing we live in a multi-ethnic, multicultural society. And there are very different perspectives on this topic from a cultural perspective that schools just wouldn't be equipped to unpack. So, another way to look at this is respecting those values by sharing resources and research and other topics for people to make to make their own decisions. I think that kind of nudging out of the way might be helpful in addressing this issue. Because I think, like, having a heavy-handed approach, whether you're conservative or liberal, there's no evidence to say that your policies are making a difference. So to my conservative listeners out there, just know traditional family values may very well not be impacted by teaching that in classrooms. And to my progressive liberal friends and viewers out there, just remember, earlier intervention, earlier exposure doesn't lead to healthier sexual choices either. So given that quagmire, remember that public policy can't square this circle. Perhaps the better approach is getting out of the way of people's choices and say, hey, by the way, there are sexual health services that you can access. There are, guidance counselors, etc. There are, professionals you can chat to in a free, judgment-free zone. But also, we recognize there are cultural sensitivities as well that we want to respect in a multi-ethnic approach. So I feel like conservatives and liberals they're both missing the point, and they both don't understand the environment that youth find themselves in. And both approaches are limiting because they don't address the underlying cause and the underlying root cause, which are behavioral change. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with the UK government's decision? Again, I don't know the content. I'm assuming it's not like overtly sexual information for youth under 9. But do you also agree or disagree that earlier exposure leads to better sexual health choices? I personally don't, but let me know what you think in the comment section below.